Hey, this is Seagrove, and today I want to talk to you guys about skill. So, when I came into the game, I didn't have a friend who was super good, who got me into the game, was holding my hand and showing me how to be good at the game. I just sort of happened into it. My friends and I have been playing base set through Fossil with jank decks since the time we were 8, when the game came out. And one of us just buys a pack of newer cards. It's got this Charizard that's so strong compared to what we're playing with. And then it just sort of became an arms race. And then I got into the competitive scene. They did too for a bit, but I stayed. And I go to my first tournament. It's a cities, and I get second, and I think I'm good. And then I go to another cities, and I get smashed. And I go to a couple league challenges and get smashed. And not smashed, but you know what I mean. I lose hard. And then I am just like, okay, so maybe I wasn't so good at this game. But skill is a very interesting thing to me, and the development of skill is very interesting to me. And I think there are sort of 3 or 4 overarching skills, and then a bunch of little skills that can be categorized into those 4 groups. So I'm going to talk about these 4 groups, and 2 of them are very related. All of them are sort of related, but I'm not talking about playing quickly for the clock or knowing when to scoop, but those are part of the one skill in the game, which is what should I do right now? And that's, if you always know what to do and you do it, then you're a perfect player. But that's obviously silly to even talk about just like that. So the 4 things that I see as the main skills are sequencing, probability, seeing the future, and resource management. So I'm sure some of you have other things you'd like to add to that. I think everything can go under those groups, but let me know if you have other ideas. So for sequencing is basically the order in which you do things. Playing cards in the correct order, using effects in the correct order, abilities, things like that. So you want to give yourself the most options and the best chance of the best probability, which is where it links to that, of finding what you need. And sometimes those 2 are working against each other. For instance, maybe you want to use you have an elixir and an ultra ball. And well, I want to use the ultra ball first to thin my deck so that I can be more likely to hit the elixir. But if I whiff the elixir, I have to get a Tapu Lele so I can Sycamore and get another energy. But if I hit the elixir, I can just Guzma and win. So something like that. So that's where the 2 are in conflict, and then the skill and sequencing is knowing which one to do first. And I think situations like that can be somewhat obvious, but there are obviously much more complicated and complex decisions there sometimes to be made. So knowing how to prioritize what makes sequencing one of the strongest skills in most intricate and complicated skills in the game. So then we'll talk about probability because it's already sort of tied in there. Probability is like knowing which play to make. And sometimes there are very obvious ones like, do I Ultra Ball first or do I Elixir first? And that's obvious if I know 100% what I'm going to Ultra Ball for. I'm going to Ultra Ball first to thin my deck, and then I'm going to use my Elixir. Unless I already know there's an energy on top somehow, like with Premonition or something. But there's another sequencing thing. But anyways, so they are pretty linked. So there are some very obvious ones, but then there are very complicated ones. Like I have a Super Rod, and I have a Shaman, and I have 15 cards in deck, and 3 of them are energies, and I have no energies in discard, basic energies. Do I play the Super Rod, and then do I play the Shaman so I can draw an extra card, but I have a less chance of drawing on each? Or do I play the Shaman and then play the Super Rod so that I draw 1 fewer cards, but I have fewer cards in deck? And I actually did the math on this problem with a friend once, trying to figure it out. So, because the situation came up, and that knowing probability like that, almost no one could do that in their head during a game in time. I'm sure there's someone in the world who can, but you need to get good in terms of using probability at estimating those thoughts. Like there are good ways of estimating, but I'm not getting into it. But that's another really big skill. I think the third one is I called it seeing the future, and there's a lot of aspects to this. Knowing both players' win conditions, and therefore you can know how many turns you have to reach your win condition based on your opponent's board and stuff like that. And knowing what your opponent wants to do because you know their win condition, you know what their goals are for this match and what they're trying to achieve. And so when I first started thinking about this, I would see like my opponent's turn. So, okay, I'm going to take this knockout, and then my opponent's going to take that knockout. And that's easy, but some people don't. I've played many people who don't see that I win next turn automatically. Like, you take this knockout, I take that knockout, that's game. And both of us don't want to tie, so why aren't you scooping? Is sort of what's going through my mind. But they're just playing out their whole turn. And then once you're able to see your opponent's turn, I'm not sure. Sometimes it probably depends on how you are, but sometimes you're able to see your next turn first, and then I think maybe that's how I was. I could see my second turn, not the turn I'm taking, but I could foresee my next turn, and then I started being able to see my opponent's upcoming turn. I'm not sure which one came first for me, but as I've improved at the game, I'm to the point now where I'm often able to see like 3 turns ahead. I know there's really good pro players, or maybe 2, at least 2 for both of us ahead, and I think I'm working on my 3rd turn now. And then there are pro players who are seeing basically the entire game, like 7 turns ahead and stuff like that, which is super cool. But I think that's one way in which seeing the future is helpful. But I'm starting to realize, really, you're basically playing both sides of the board. Like, I'm going to do this. My opponent's going to do this. Okay, then what do I do? And I think you sort of have to be able to, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think as I'm getting better at it, that you have to be able to see the game very objectively. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, they're going to do this, I'm going to do this, they're going to do this. This is how the game is going to go. And the reason it's helpful to be able to know what's going to happen, how many turns your opponent is going to need to win, etc., is because, okay, if this deck moves like it normally moves, I'm going to win in 3 turns. They're going to win in 2 turns. So I have to draw perfectly. Therefore, I need to take risks that I wouldn't normally take to make it happen. And that's not always the correct response, but that's an example. Yeah, so that's seeing the future. So sequencing and probability, seeing the future. And the last one is resource management. And this is, I think, the most... It's between this and sequencing, probably, for which is the people make the most misplays on, like the best players misplay on the most, is my understanding. Because resource management in general, like just like everything, there's some very basics to it. Like, what should I discard with my Ultra Ball? I have 2 Sycamores. I'm not going to be able to use both. So I'm definitely not going to be able to use this because I'm going to have to Sycamore this turn or something like that. But then you get really, really complicated ones like, do I use this puzzle to look at the top 3? Or do I save it in hopes of finding a double puzzle? Like, how much do you need to look at the top 3? How bad a situation are you in, etc.? Or what do I trade? That, or what do I Ultra Ball away? When you have a huge hand, knowing which card to trade, like sometimes, yeah, I have a bridge it, and I'm not going to bridge it again for the rest of the game. That can be very easy, but sometimes I want this in the discard pile, okay, so I can trade that, but maybe you have 5 cards and you want all of them. This one could win me the game, but I might not ever be able to use it, like maybe a counter catcher or something. This one is going to be okay at any time in the game. This one, you know, like you have all these different options, which one's better? Just knowing what to discard when is really difficult to do. And a lot of people, I was talking to Michael Pramo about this, and he said, you know, I'm sure I ultra ball away the wrong things sometimes, and little things like that. And that's just, it's so hard to do everything perfectly. But these are, I think, the 4 skills, and this is sort of how I look at the big picture of skill growth. Like almost every skill falls under sequencing, seeing the future, like knowing how the game's going to go, probability, and resource management. So I'm working on all of those things. Especially right now, I'm working on seeing the future in my own play. And I think it's really good if you can play focusing on a certain skill to improve that skill. I think that's a really great way to improve. So just subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.